Hello and welcome. My name is Zaffar Iqbal, and you are watching the Mojo story. Bodies of a woman and two children who were missing since Monday have likely are those which have been found from a river in Manipur. That's what reports say. And some reports say that three more bodies have been found. There were a total of six people who went missing on Monday. And since then, we've been seeing protests taking place in Manipur, but now six bodies have been found. The bodies have been sent for postmortem to the hospital, but reports indicate that they could possibly be the same people who went missing on Monday. Uh, Now they've been sent to Silchar Medical College, and from the same place, there was 10 people who were killed in the encounter. Their bodies have been sent back to their homes. So we've seen the state really back on the edge. You see on the screen that people have been protesting. There have been civilian casualties that have been taking place in that state, and the polarization that started a year ago seems to be getting wider and wider with every passing day. To discuss this, we're joined by an eminent panel. We're joined by Rami and Desai, who's a Northeast scholar and distinguished fellow at India Foundation. Welcome, Rami. And also, we're joined by Seilen Haokip, Kuki National Organization spokesperson. Welcome, Seilen. Rami, if I may start with you, there was a lull for some time in Manipur, and Manipur was off the headlines. But we've seen the state back in headlines, but again for wrong reasons. Now there have been an encounter, people have been found missing. Now, of the six people who went missing, one is a grandmother, the mother, and three children, and now bodies have been found. Where is the state heading to? What is going wrong there?
Mr. Iqbal, thank you for having me on your show. I think, we've been discussing Manipur for the last year, over a year. And, people like us who observe it so closely, there's a certain amount of hope that comes in when things seem to subside, but it's always only ever short lived. Now, anybody who watches conflict areas or difficult, areas will tell you that generally this seems like there are vested interests that are interested in keeping this conflict alive. That's why ever so often when things start going back to normalcy, something happens, there is aggression and it bursts into flames again. Now, I've said this from the very first day that the fact that this is a complex problem, because there have been legacy issues, there are historical problems, there are ethnic rivalries, so on and so forth. There's so many problems. The communities have to take responsibility. Community leadership has to take responsibility, because either way, it's not acceptable for any community involved to either have this sort of aggression towards the other community where children and women are being impacted, or to be supportive of the perpetrators. And this when I say this, I'm not exempting any community from it, So I think the responsibility of this has to be laid on the shoulders of community members, as much as people love to lay it on the shoulders of our security forces as well, of government of India as well. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Iqbal, that the government of India is not going to allow any political ends to be met if it is if the way to get it is aggression and conflict and murder and pillaging, like we have seen. You can forget about it if political ends are going to be met, if this is how you're trying to pressure the government of India. And again, I say this to all communities involved. So first of all, I think it has to be very clear, and through the media also, I think it's very important for this to go out there, that you cannot hold the state to ransom, you cannot hold government of India to ransom. And of course, while law and order is a priority, as it should be for any government, the fact is that until unless we have absolute support of community leaders, who don't support perpetrators like this, and we have seen support for perpetrators come up ever so often, this conflict will not ease. And finally, like I've mentioned before, if this is a way to make political ends meet or bargain, this conflict will continue because no state is going to buckle under this sort of pressure.
Right. Well, Seilen, you heard it from Rami. Would you agree that the leadership across the communities has failed to build bridges between communities, and that's one reason that that the state has reached where it's reached now, and it seems to be a downward spiral, and the violence that we see sometimes subsiding keeps on erupting from time to time.
Iqbal, this is the first time I'm on your show and also with Rami. Greetings to you, despite the circumstances we all face. This is humanity on our faces. And can you still hear me? I can't see you anymore.
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, you can see me. Now, with respect to community leaders being involved and wanting to go forward, I would vouch for my personal engagement in that capacity very officially. And excuse me. Yeah, sorry. Yes, I'm personally engaged in that very essence of a pursuit to bring about peace in our community and with respect to our neighbors. And that's precisely why Government of India has engaged with the suspension of operations groups, of which I am spokesman for the other umbrella organization, ours being the Kuki National Organization and the other being the United People's Front. Now, we have been discussing issues since 2016. And unfortunately, there has been no breakthrough despite the fact that our demands are entirely constitutional. Now, to cut that long story short, in the wake of May 3rd, 2023, when there was supposed to be a closure to our political demand, which was a territorial council within Manipur, this problem erupted. Now, clearly, from our point of view, there are forces who do not want to grant us any autonomy, although it is within the state. Now, if you go back to Autonomous District Council under Article 371C, even that was rendered completely toothless by the powers that be. And as you know, this suspension of operations signed with the Government of India and the Government of Manipur is clearly to establish peace and to go way forward within the constitutional framework. Now, why on earth is the state government, who from our side are attributed for aggravating this whole, not only the present situation from May 3rd, but we are, you know, hopelessly seeing that the state's hand is involved, and therefore, alarmingly, it is called a state-sponsored program against the Kuki people. Kuki-Zo people, as we call now, to be more inclusive in terms of the generic term. Now, why did the state abrogate suspension of operation, which is the only instrument that the Government of India has taken into account to pursue our demands within the Constitution and to bring about peace? Now, clearly, who are the perpetrators and who are the victims of this? Forget the details of how many died, how many did not die, etc., who started, who didn't start. Those are facts to be established by the Commission of Inquiry, if you like, because there are too many versions, despite the facts that intelligence agencies in the country have. So now I stand representing a group that is looking for a way forward so that peace will be established. Who has suffered most in this? The people who are not.
Selen, the point is that there are demands of communities. These are long pending demands. These have been there since years. But what happened now? Since the last 2 years, there's violence that has erupted on the ground. Shouldn't the priority be to calm down the tempers, to bring some sort of a reconciliation? Why should there be buffer zones at all? Why should people be separated? Those issues that you are talking about are issues, genuine issues That can be resolved through dialogue.
Precisely. That's what
Yes,
I'm saying. The dialogue table is in place. Why is the state government not participating? This is the sort of paradox that we are in. We do not in any way condone the violence. We want to talk this whole matter through. And what is happening now is the very fact that these talks are not breaking through because the state is against it. Unfortunately, so many people die on both sides. Now, if there was cooperation on the tripartite agreement and talks continue, then we could have somewhere. Now, people keep saying communities should talk. The only official establishment in the given situation of suspension of operations is not being honored by the state. The center is SOOR. For what other intentions would we want to be sitting at the table instead of killing each other on ground?
right.
Please answer me that question.
Rami, you want to come in. The point that he's making is that state, rather being a facilitator, is a stumbling block when it comes to the dialogue process.
Look, Mr. Iqbal, Seilen is, I've always said this to him, he's very eloquent, he's very articulate, but we do have differing opinions here because I'm very clear on the fact that, I don't want to now start discussing what was being discussed at the beginning of the conflict because there are two sides of the story. As far as Seilen is concerned, the side of the story is that, oh, we were very close to finalizing a deal on the Territorial Council, right? Which can be contested and has been contested many a times as well. I'm not saying it's been contested by me, but I'm saying publicly. On the other side, you have another group that will say, well, where did the objection to the scheduled tribe status come in if this was about a territorial council deal? So this can have both sides of the stories. And I think anybody going back to that, of course, you can, and you can continue arguing, but it holds no water any longer to the situation that we are dealing with. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Iqbal, that we have reached a point in this conflict, forget what we want politically, but if we've reached a point where women and little children are being massacred out of, who are IDPs already, I think we need to scale back as a gesture of humanity. Everybody involved needs to scale back, put their political ambitions on the side, and tackle the case at hand that, this is out of control. Now, obviously, easiest is to blame the state government. I don't believe for one second that this is a pogrom because we've had deaths on both sides. We've had conflicts on both sides. Of course, both sides also feel victimized. Now, having said that, where the state is concerned, as many dissenters there are that many supporters also. The fact of the matter is, and if you look at this very pragmatically, the fact of the matter is that when the chief minister went to resign, there was a whole bunch of people who stopped him as well. Of course, people can say, yes, that was all theater. That was theatrics, and it wasn't natural. You can say that, but the fact is that happened. And also I think we need to be very clear on the fact that when we talk about Sue and this agreement, as much as one party might feel that it's really important, there are also doubts that have been cast on the veracity of the Sioux. For example, that recruitment was continuing, the fact that Sioux camps were placed around and not very judiciously around the valley, making the valley feel insecure. So the point here is that every argument in the Manipur conflict has a counter argument. But we have to look at this very rationally now because, at the level of viciousness that I'm seeing with these murders, there is something very wrong with what people feel that they can get away with. And why they feel that they can get away with is because there is some sort of heroics that is attached to it. Even the perpetrators, the 10 militants who were killed, people are hailing them as heroes. Is this the kind of public, public outcry that there should be, wherein people are saying that the murderers are heroes and people are accepting it? So, I think our narrative has to change. I think we have to scale back on our political ambitions. I think we have to understand that whatever our political wants and needs are will have to take a back seat, because until and unless this sort of violence stops, I don't think there can be any argument towards any deal happening for anybody.
Seilen, the situation that we are in right now, children and women who are already displaced are murdered, they're killed, they're small babies, they have nothing to do with anything. Shouldn't this be a wake up call for all the people to stop and to step back? The situation is really gone out of hand. There is a historical context to all of this, which we agree. But right now, the situation that is staring us in our face is extremely dangerous.
I fully empathize with Rami's sentiments there and yours, presumably, and I'm sure it is. Now, just to refer to Rami's point on the ST status demand by the Meiteis, that has never ever figured or will figure in our political dialogue. In our political dialogue, unlike our neighbors, ours is, I repeat, a constitutional demand where the previous Autonomous District Council was not adequate. And therefore, we have come to the table. Well, whilst other groups, armed groups, have not come to the table, we should be given credit for that. And our submission to the Home Ministry in writing is very clear. So now, we all feel the loss of lives. Seriously do. My heart goes out to everyone who is mourning today for their loved ones, the bereaved family members. Who's going to go and console them? It's inhuman. Now, having said that, from my point of view, which I agree, and I'm sure many will subscribe, not because I am Kuki and I'm not Meitei, but on the objectivity of what is going on with the government of India on the table, our demands are simply, constitutional. We don't want to break up Manipur. We didn't break up Manipur. It's the other side that have broken by chasing us out. And now they want to hold on to us and blame us for breaking up Manipur. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Now, how do you go forward from here? The Honorable Home Minister has rightly stated, from his point of view, which I respect, that there must be peace first in order for political settlement. Now, we have responded very positively, saying we will not cross the buffer zone. As long as nobody come and attacks us and the central forces are respected, then we will not go on the offensive. And we have not. Maybe there are just a very small percentage of incidents where, Kotruk being the last, is something that happened not with the SOO people. These are village volunteers. And I don't, in a moment want to sort of comment on that. Now, all the deaths from the valley side who have been found in this conflict have died across the buffer zone in our areas. How many have you seen of Kukis dying across the other side of the border, except for 3rd May and subsequent days while we were still trying to escape? Now, let's be objective. I don't want anybody to take sides. I want people to be objective if we are going to be reaching a solution where each side is, respected. So that is the bottom line from me, from our side.
Right.
We do not want to hurt anybody. We do not want anybody to hurt us. And as the old philosophy says, let's let each other be.
Right.
Thank you.
Rami, you want to come in before I ask you another question? Yeah.
Buffer zone. I'm sure you live in Delhi. Let's say if you were in Noida and I said, well, there's a buffer zone, you can't come into Delhi. Would you accept that? No. And this goes against both ways, and I don't say this without, I do have understanding of how high the sentiments are in Manipur and how uncomfortable it is for two communities right now to see eye to eye. But if we normalize this, whether it is verbally or just as a part of our political dialogue, I don't think it's going to benefit anybody at this point. Because if a buffer zone is created within a state that you say is unified, then in my opinion, territorially, that state is not unified. And that is going to cause further anxieties. Plus, it's not a nice way to live, because And I say this again from a very humanitarian perspective here, Mr. Iqbal, because I think we're dealing with the murder, the brutal murder of children and babies and women, uh, IDPs from both ends. We can't just take the fact that they can't go back to their homes for granted. There has to be a time when, IDPs can go back to wherever they belong, whether it's in the valley or whether it's in the hills. For that, we must segregate poor, innocent civilians from whatever our political dialogue is. So I think it's high time we stop creating more fault lines, like I said, either verbally or in our political dialogue, because eventually there's going to be no end to it. So that is my limited points to Mr. Seilen making, a point about the buffer zone. I'm very
R- r-
uncomfortable with this. Yeah.
Rami, the point that I was trying to ask you is that there is no political dialogue taking place. What is happening is that whenever there is an eruption of violence, the natural response of the center, of the government, is to send in more soldiers, send in more troops to quell the violence. And that is what is happening in phases. There is violence, there is a response. Again, the situation sort of calms down, then there is another round of violence, more companies are sent. Where is the political dialogue? There is no political dialogue. I remember that there were committees set up where members from both the communities were to come in and then to try and discuss this issue and resolve it across the table, but that never happened.
Mr. Iqbal, there have been many rounds of political dialogues, and they have been in Delhi. Many people I know have been involved as well. Yes, it has been a very difficult road because communities are not willing to come on the table together. Also, the varying agendas of the political demands also is very disruptive in making all the committees come together and sit on the table and take some sort of genuine action. But no, it would be incorrect to say that there hasn't been any political dialogue. Yes, that political
I
dialogue
mean, the
hasn't
way
been.
forward, it has not broken the ice. There has
Yeah,
been
but
no
it
sort of a movement forward.
correct. So, this is a problem. Solutions like problems like this don't necessarily, the solutions don't necessarily just come from a political dialogue. It comes from some amount of understanding amongst the people and amongst the heavy bodied organizations that Manipur is infamous for, whether they are militant organizations or the political fronts of militant organizations. The fact is that until and unless they come on the table, until and unless they scale back what their demands are, at least for the love of the love of the people of Manipur. I don't think a political solution is going to be the only solution that's going to solve all their problems, because this is not entirely a political problem. Yeah, sure, people might say, you can argue it either way, that this is only a political problem, but I think that will be dishonest to say that. There is certain anxieties, there are certain rivalries. Yes, sure, there's been dialogue for a really long time of demands that have come from the hills, and they should be looked upon sympathetically. But like I'm saying, until and unless there is peace, sir, there cannot be any further dialogue. Government of India doesn't work like that. It has never worked like that. Number two, until and unless, and here I'm not just talking about the civil society organizations that are dime a dozen in Manipur. I'm also talking about your local bodies that represent communities and have great amount of influence on ground. People like that also need to come up. It is very important. If you're going to wait for just politics to come and say, well, this is the solution we give you, I can guarantee it's not going to be acceptable. Today, if somebody says, let's say, this discussion has also been on the table, that there should be union territory status, it's not going to be acceptable to another community. Then what do you do? If you say, oh, we want a separate state, it's not going to be acceptable to all the communities involved in Manipur. What are you going to do? So this is not a question about political solutions. This is a question about understanding what can be done, cannot be done, and what is going to be beneficial for everybody who lives in Manipur. And that will only come back by scaling the violence back, not using violence as a tool to pressure the government, whether it's the state government or the central government. I think the agenda from all parties right now has to be absolute peace and condemnation of the vicious perpetrators, who I will go as far to say, Anybody indulging in this sort of violence where children and women are impacted should, get the highest, uh, they should be tried for the highest crime that is possible.
Right. Still, in the point that's being made is that peace is paramount. The governments cannot be pressurized through violence. Whoever commits that violence, whichever side, believes in violence to be a tool to pressurize the government, that is not possible. The question is, doesn't it worry you when you are living in a place where there's a buffer zone, that people are separated? The polarization has reached to this extent. Shouldn't people do something and not wait for the governments, for the state and the center to at least calm down the situation a bit, to build some sort of bridges between themselves?
Now, we have to get down to the reality of the situation. Rami pins the whole, calamity that we all face on the political demand of our people. Now, that political demand, why did it emerge? It emerged on a very transparent platform and with objectives that are, not against anybody. Now, that has been not accepted by the state, as she says. One party will not accept. I don't know of any creation of states or in the country where both sides come to the table and agree and say, well, yes, we have to. There may be cases, but there are always one side that will be opposed to it. And what makes the situation resolve is the role of the central government. And they have succeeded in doing that by creating so many different states in the last 10 years as well. Now, why are being denied this when it is no skin off anybody's teeth? Now, with respect to violence, violence has started, and Rami rightly points out about the unacceptability of people being killed, particularly women and children. Now, I'm sure she's referring to the Kuki women and children who were also faced with that, situation from 3rd May, particularly in the Imphal Valley, where we were completely vulnerable under the, areas where there are the majoritarian community. So I take her point, very objective as it should be, and I appreciate her for that. Now, you know, we have to deal with the current situation, which has been persisting since last year, May, by looking at the facts involved. Yes, we all wish the buffer zone could be removed. Why was the buffer zone there in the first place? To avoid precisely what we're talking about today, no additional deaths on either side. And that's the role of the center. And we should appreciate that. The buffer zone is not there to save one community and perpetrate violence on the other. That's why it's a central force. So
Right.
I don't see why we who have a political demand, which is completely, nothing to be apologetic about because it's constitutional, to be sort of insinuated to say this is why there is this problem going on. And therefore, if you just take back your political demand and not shoot and fight, then all will be hunky dory. Now, that is to me, no offense meant, wishful thinking. People have died. Who died first? Let's not get into that. But
Right.
here you need to, get down to brass tacks. The state government needs to come on board at the political dialogue table. They represent the state. KNO and UPF represent our people, and the center is there willing to proceed at the table. And unless you go through this in parallel with other efforts from all sections of the community, we're not going to get anywhere. And to
Right.
say this will be possible and this will never be possible, who are we to make that judgment? I mean, what prerogative do we have in an
Right.
individual capacity, irrespective of the illustrious, academic, credentials we might have? Let's call a spade, and let's deal with issues
Rami,
pragmatically.
Rami, you want to come in? Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, yes, I've been very vocal on any women and children being killed on any side. I was vocal previously in May as well, and I am vocal now. It doesn't matter to me sitting on the outside or just as a citizen of this country whether the victim is a Meitei or a Kuki or a Naga. But I can say this. I want to know if people and leadership that represent some of these communities can actually say this without being pressured from their larger community. So what is also happening is that this has become such a conflict where rationality has taken a back seat, and it's kind of become difficult to be able to criticize your own community for the fear that you will look like somebody who is disloyal to their community. And that's a very dangerous precedence to go by, because if you cannot say what the truth is, then there can never be any solution. Having said that, when we come to the question of what Seilen said about political solutions, I can only say it, and I'll be very clear about this, as somebody who's observed and has 20 years of experience in observing negotiations and conflicts. Nobody knows anything for sure. But I do know one thing, that the government of India uh, will not negotiate like this. I think until and unless there is relative peace, it will be very difficult for them, for the sake of the larger security and incentives that are in place in a region like the Northeast, to take a decision on the status of the political demands that have been laid out. Of course, I don't blame this conflict just on political demands. I also blame it on the fact that a lot of Mr. Iqbal, um, a lot of the anxieties that had surfaced, and that's not within this, in the last 5 6 years, but a lot of the anxieties that had surfaced for decades were never addressed. And I think it came to a boiling point. And Manipur's always been a very complex state. It's not an easy state to deal with because of the amount of communities that are involved, unlike in other states. So we have to also be cognizant of other communities like the Nagas who are stakeholders there, or the other smaller communities who have no voice any longer, like the Tamils who used to live there, or the other Nepalis who used to live there. They don't. We don't even talk about them in this conflict because they are a minority in the state. So, my simple point in this would really be that, let's not make this about, oh, somebody is blaming just, one community, or somebody is blaming just another community, because really, it's not about me. It's about the people who live there. And I think, uh, if we are going to live in this la la land that, uh, if we keep the pressure on the state government or the central government, we're going to come to a solution. I think we're very mistaken. You also mentioned that there were so many soldiers that are being put on the ground. I think the situation demands it, sir, because there was a time when people were actually asking for central forces to be brought down to Manipur. And once the government does that, that's again not good enough. So it seems like a case where nothing that the government is doing is good enough, yet nobody
Right.
wants to take responsibility for it.
Right. Selen, we're coming to the end of our discussion. The point is that in a conflict zone, and when the conflict is so sharp and there is so much polarization on the ground, the test for leadership is even more. What is the way forward? Your last comments, Selen.
Will Rami Desai that no government in this country would buckle to firepower to meet their political demand. It may have happened in the past, it will not happen, and it should not happen. And to reinforce that statement, we have never pointed our guns against the security forces. What is happening now is offensives, defensive, that has been going on. So the way forward is already in place. Give credit to the government of India for establishing that. And the only way forward now is not in the battlefields on ground, but let's battle it out across the table diplomatically with facts, whether it's a political demand or whatever. Unless you talk, you can't go forward. And that forum for talks is already established. Let the state come on board and let them speak to us what they do not want us to do or what they want us to do. Let them hear what we want also. That's the whole process of dialogue, the only way to go
Right.
forward. So
Right.
let's not come on the way of or in the way of dialogue which is in process now. So
Yes.
let us be honest with one another.
Right.
Let us speak,
R-
let's agree to disagree, and find a way forward across the table, and give credit to the government of India for sticking to this. Hats
right.
off to the government of India.
Dialogue is the way forward, and let's sit across the table and try and resolve our issues. A last word to you, Rami, before we wrap up.
Well, all I can say is I've been following this for a while now, and it's really tragic at what's happening. It's come to a point where we've lost any sense of balance and rationality. And we keep talking about our demands, but there are lives that are completely, and on all sides, there are lives that are completely ruined. Do you think, these babies and these women who've died and who've died previously, other people who died previously as well, do you think their families can ever recover? Do you think the IDPs can ever go back to living a normal life? Therefore, let's start easing the pressure. Let's stop talking about a buffer zone. Let's stop trying to concretize that buffer zone. Let's start talking about or identifying leaders who have influence on ground and who can come on the negotiating table. Let's start condemning violence and the perpetrators of violence. And only when this is done wholly, solely, and genuinely, I think we can expect the government to sort of scale back a little bit in terms of the kind of force that they have to use on ground at this point. But let's think of our soldiers also, who've been on high alert for almost a year and a half. So let's not just think about what we want. I think the time really has come for us to reach out and say, look, time out. We need a break. Let's just cease fire first of all. Let's take a few initiatives in building bridges. Nothing's going to happen in 6 months. If you make this effort, the world is not going to fall apart. One can still come back to whatever the demands are and whatever you think is ideal for your community, and you look better for it. But I think in the meanwhile, we need to cease fire.
Right.
There's no other way.
Ceasefire. We need to cease fire. We need to step back, just because of the fact that polarization and violence has destroyed this beautiful state. So it's important that perhaps everybody needs to step back, and dialogue is really the way forward. We'll have to leave it here. Rami and Seilen, thanks so much for coming to our show and today, and for being on the panel. And thanks to all our viewers for watching the Mojo Story.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.